Hey, this is Wh1tcomb here. Today I'm going to tell you about the concept of parallels and how you can use parallels with your effects to create nice blended sounds. If you haven't heard of parallels or if you don't know how they work, hopefully this will help to explain that, and hopefully you'll start using them in your productions, because they really do make a difference with the sounds you can create. So first off, the idea of a parallel is the idea of taking an original sound and blending it with an affected sound. So let's say you have a bass patch, right? So you have a bass and that's the original sound of it, but then let's say you slap a distortion on that bass. So now you're only getting the bass with the distortion. But let's say you want to blend the original bass with the distorted sound of the bass. So using parallels would allow you to take the basic original sound and the distorted sound and mix them together in order to create a blended sound. So I'll explain how to do this in Ableton, but keep in mind that a lot of these techniques still do apply with other DAWs. Just do some Google searches and see how you can do them with your DAW. But I'll go through several ways to do it in Ableton. So to start off, here's what I have here, so you know what we're working with today. Okay, so it's nothing special. All the basses are just samples. I'm just trying to show you something. It sounds kind of beginnerish, but hopefully by the end, once I've done some effecting, it'll sound a little better. But it's just a concept to give you an idea of how you can do some parallels, right? So the first way we can do parallels, at least at Ableton and also with some other plugins, are directly in the app themselves, or directly in the plugin themselves. So let's say let's see, this is the multi-bass, right? So this is what the multi-bass sounds like. Oh, hold on. This is what the multi-bass sounds like. Okay, so in Ableton and with some other plugins, let's say I'm going to search for this plugin called Amp, right? So I'm going to slap that on here, and you notice there's a dry wet, right? So if we set this to 100, this is what we get. Okay, so that's just 100% wet, all distorted with the amp. So let's say if I want half to be distorted with the amp, I'd set that to dry wet, right? 25. So this is great, and this is a good way if you want to do a quick thing, but it's lacking, and you're missing out on some other things you can do, and I'll show you what I mean by that later. So that's the first way, right? So then the second way would be to use a send, right? So down here you'll see, or you'll use returns and sends. So down here you'll see that we have an A return, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this same amp, right? And I'm going to drop it on this A return. So now I have to set it up so that this multi-bass is going to send, right? So you see A send here. So right now, if I put this up to 100%, what it's doing is it's sending 100% of that signal all the way to this amp. So when I hit it, okay, so if I solo that, you'll hear it. Okay, so, but let's say I don't want all of that to sound like that. I want it to be half. So let's say I'll pull it down halfway, right? And then we'll get this. Okay, so that's the second way to do it, right? Now, probably my favorite way to do it is using an audio effect track in Ableton. So we're going to drop it on this multi-bass again, right? So right now, we have the amp. It's at 100%. So now I'm going to group it. So that's Control G on PC, and I think it's probably Command G maybe on Mac. Okay, so now if I go here and I open up, and that's what I want this. So I open up this portion, you notice that we have a chain, right? So I'm gonna duplicate that. So now we have 2 chains with that same amp on it, right? So let's say we go to this first chain, right? And we're gonna make this the actual amp effect, right? So that's gonna be at 100%. And then we're gonna go to the second chain, and you can either delete the amp or just turn it off. So I'm gonna turn it off, right? So right now we're gonna rename this dry. So, and then we're gonna rename this wet. So you'll see these are both at 0 dB. So let's see if we pull this wet. As I pull this wet back, you'll notice that that it's going to change it. So let's start it, just for simplicity, let's start at -16, and then I'll slowly work it up. So this is what you should get. So none's there. And as I pull it in, you'll distort. Okay, and why I like this the best is because it allows me to do some processing. So let's say I just want to distort the high, right? So I can take that EQ8 and I'm going to drop it in front of this amp, right? So now I'm going to put a filter in, pull it all the way up here, right? So now I'm just, to this wet, I am just sending these high frequencies into the amp while still keeping the low frequencies nice and bassy. So now you'll see what happens here. Let's pull this all the way down, and as I increase, you'll notice the difference. So here's it without it. With it. Without. So there you go. So I've just affected that wet signal. So that's my favorite way to do it, and this is why paralleling is so cool, is because it allows you to affect it in different ways. Now I could use the same technique, right? So let's do something different. Let's do a parallel compression, right? So I'm going to use the drums and I'm going to send them. So let's insert a send a return track. So I'm going to take the drums, right, and I'm going to send them all the way to this return. And I'm going to call this New York compression. And what New York compression is it's just this sort of parallel compression. So I'm going to drop a compressor on there, right? And then I'm also going to drop an EQ8. Oops. I'm going to set this before the EQ8, right? So now I'm going to scoop out that middle. Let's do it like, it's 3. So let's do it like this. So I'm going to scoop out the middle. So just going to the sends right now, when it's getting that effect, it's getting just the low and the mid frequencies, right? So now I'm going to turn on the compressor, and I'm going to crank down the threshold, and then we're going to see what it does, how much it pulls down. So okay, and then we're going to crank this up, right? So we're going to, let's say we're going to crank this up to 10. So you notice you get a nice thump and crunch, right? And actually, I want to turn off makeup. So, and then here's the original signal. So if I turn this off, you'll notice what I've just done is I've added this nice thump here and nice crunch at the top end too. So we'll turn it all the way off, right? So, and as I turn it up, you'll notice that you get massive drums, and that's another way to do paralleling, is New York compression. Okay, so those are just 2 things you can do with parallels, but don't limit yourself. You could use parallels for any effect you want. You can use parallels with delays to create interesting effects that are mixed. You can use them with EQs to separate some EQ frequencies. You saw me use it with distortion, with compression, and you can use them with just about anything. But whenever you have something where you like your original signal, but you want just a little more while keeping the original signal, think about using parallels, because that usually is the answer you're looking for. So hopefully this helped. Let me know what you think about it, and let me know if you have any suggestions for any other tutorials that you'd be interested in seeing. Thanks. Have a nice day.